Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, the Technical Evangelist at CTC, and today, in collaboration with APAL, our partners in Australia, we want to bring you the Hive CMS and go over a very comprehensive introduction here for you. So, what are we actually going to cover, and kind of what is this about? Well, Hive is a newish content management system. It's been out for a little while now. And you're here obviously because you've heard a little bit about it and you kind of want to see what it can do for you. What I'm going to do is introduce to you what this CMS can do, take you through the new interface. So if you happen to have seen the previous iteration of the Hive CMS, this is going to take you through the new UI and the new management capabilities. And I'm hopefully going to be able to help you understand exactly how you can help your users more efficiently browse for content to basically be added to your Revit and BIM projects. We'll also take a little bit of a look to see how your firm is using content based on the dashboarding functionality that exists inside of here as well. And you'll be able to see firsthand and kind of see how this information can be communicated to the rest of your team. So I'm going to go over a couple of major things. I'm going to kind of define the base functionality of Hive, show you a bit about how it works and how users can navigate the general interface. I'm actually going to use this to start a project and drop in some content. I'm going to show a little bit about the organization of libraries, how that can be done, and how you can leverage that to speed up the end user searches. You'll kind of see some of that in the example of the user navigation in the first place. I'll use some examples there. And then you'll see how to manage that user content access as well as we dig lightly into the management UI. So before I go too deep into this and just start showing off features, I want to talk about why Hive. Why do we have this tool in the first place? And really, here's the issue, right? We've got so many files within our libraries, and Windows file structure really gets out of hand quick. The file name very frequently isn't enough to always identify exactly what it is I'm trying to open, what I'm trying to load into my project. So people will often load many things and then finally get the one they wanted, but then very frequently not purge stuff out. And then the final issue here, and this is especially relevant these days, is it's more difficult to access content when you're out of office. When we're working from home, when we're trying to work on these projects, in many cases they're stored in BIM 360, but our content is still in an office environment, so we have to VPN in to gain access to it. That's a little bit more frustrating. Depending on your network infrastructure, that might not be as big of a problem for you, but really still, there's so many files regardless, and just using the old traditional browse window folder structure, that really doesn't solve the problem super elegantly. So what I want to do is jump into a live discussion here and show you exactly how this can work. I'm going to do this from Revit. From Revit, you might notice here on the very top, my CTC software tab, I have a tool here called Hive, the CMS. And when I click on that button, what it's going to do is effectively open up my Hive UI. So this is where I'm landing. As an end user of Hive, actually as a company admin of Hive, that's how I'm logged in right now as myself, I have full control over the Hive environment that I'm using and the ability here to add content. Normal end users would not have this add content ability. See, I like to curate my libraries and dish it out to my team so they get exactly what I want them to find, and they're not finding other junk or adding stuff to this library that maybe I don't feel follows my standards. So I like to really carefully control this. In my case, today I'm logged in as an admin, so I have this control, but again, most users wouldn't see this button, so for them, they would just have the ability to go to the Home tab, which is where I'm at right now, the ability to search for content, and the ability to manage any saved searches they've made for themselves. We'll talk more about that in a minute here. So how do I just run a basic search? Well, up here, I can search for pretty much anything I want. I'm going to go through some architectural examples today, but this can work equally as well for structural and MEP. It really doesn't matter. But what I'm going to do is search for something simple, like maybe a single swing door. So I'm going to put in, I don't know, swing single and just kind of see what shows up. And this is going to run through a search of my entire library. If I remember correctly, I have about 50,000 entries of content in my library, and we'll see that later when I go to my dashboard. But when I'm running this search, it looks for anything kind of like a Google search that matches the search term swing single, which is the first thing that shows up, and then anything that matches swing or single, kind of across my entire library. So I'm seeing things like single cabinet. See, I didn't tell this anything about doors. I just typed in some search. If I wanted to get real specific with this, I can. As an end user, I can further filter as much as I see fit. And so I can go here to filters. I can go to, say, my Revit categories, and I can force this thing to only find doors. Looks like I had a pre-filter from before. I have actually all of my Revit categories that exist in my Hive environment, and I filtered down for just doors earlier, and I can check that if I really care to and apply that filter. And now this will search for anything that matches swing single or swing or single. And so in this case, I've got a swing single door, I've got a swing double door. The rest of my doors here are probably all going to be singles because they're all swing. And if I need more, I can certainly load more content here. And switch this down a little bit so I have a few, more rows or columns rather of content here. But I get everything I'm pretty much asking for, right? And I can really quickly load this into my project environment. But what else could I put in here? Right, this is just Revit families. That's all well and good. I can browse for that using the normal, insert load family command native to Revit. But what if I wanted something else? Like, let's say I wanted to start with a template. And so that this thing stops going to the background, I'm going to pin this to the foreground for now. So that way, when I click into Revit, Hive will stay on top of everything because I've pinned it forward. Say I wanted to use a template. And say I wanted to very easily use that template to start up a project and define that consistently. Well, you saw me type in a search string, and you saw me go over here to my filters where I can force a doors filter. But what if I do this all the time? Well, I can save that search. And if I save this, then that search will be available in my list of saved searches. In my case, I don't have any personal saved searches. These are all searches that are available to the entire company. All of them are shared searches, and I can choose which groups of people in my firm get access to these. When I make it, I can basically say, hey, everyone gets this, or the architects get this one, or the engineers get this one, and so I can actually kind of dish out who gets what. In this case, I have one called Templates Company. It's my very first search, so when people want to start a project, the very first thing that shows up in their list, because of how I named this, would be that templates little collection there. Now, when I do that selection, you might notice today that I'm using Revit 2018.3. So when I run this search, the design app that's specified here is Revit 2018. It knows that I currently have a project open, but it's also giving me back results that are relevant to Revit 2018. This one, ignore this. This is actually a misnamed file. It's 2018. But I do have 2019, 2020, 2021 templates in here. They're not showing up, because it's giving me search relevancy based on the 2018 Revit that I have open. So I can go here and use a 2018 template or an earlier 2016 template. And this, you might notice, is an RVT. It's not a typical Revit template, though I could put that in here as well. This is just an RVT starter project. It has work sharing pre-enabled, so when I double click on this, Hive knows by default to detach this and preserve my work sets, and to basically throw me into a start from scratch project of sorts, but one that already has work sharing enabled with my standards involved. So I can use this, and this is pulling this in very quickly. This template here is stored in Hive on the cloud because of how I've got my options set up. And I'll show you later where you can change that. So if you don't want your stuff cloud hosted, you can certainly turn that off. But one of the benefits here, especially right now, is, again, cloud hosting that content and making it very readily accessible. This template, this starter project, just got cached to my computer from the cloud and opened up in a detached environment. So I'm using this, and maybe I want to save it and then like sync it up to BIM 360 or something. You name it. That workflow's up to you. Now, my template is actually pretty bare by design. I have only one site plan floor plan. There's nothing else for floor plans inside of here. I've got a couple of 3D views for some Navisworks and CAD workflows that I typically want to have in my projects. Some basic elevations, but this project is relatively bare. If I go down into my families list, you might notice that I have really very few component families loaded other than my typical annotations. There's no doors, no windows. If I was doing an MEP project, no air terminals, no piping componentry. I have in my walls area here just some generics, and everything else is just default. Again, this is as stripped down as I'd like it to be, because I want to direct my team to actually pulling stuff from Hive instead of just having a huge, massively bloated template. So in order for me to demonstrate a little bit of this, I need to have some floor plans. So give me a second here. I'm going to switch over to a different suite of my tools. I'm going to use the BIM project suite for a minute. And one of my tools here is called View Creator. So I'm going to leverage this tool because it allows me to very rapidly generate some plan views here in my project. And I'm going to unpin this from the foreground for a minute. This knows what levels I have in my project environment. It knows all of my view templates from my template, the actual starter project. And I'm going to tell it what phase I want to work with here and tell this thing to create some floor plans for me. So by me just checking a couple of boxes, this thing built the rest of my views. See, I use the rest of my suite of tools in collaboration with Hive to really give me the strongest workflow possible. So I'm going to jump over to the floor plan here, and we'll go back to talking about Hive here for the rest of the session. So with this, I've just loaded up a template from Hive, and I've filled out some floor plans. I've generated myself some floor plans. I've gone to level 1 floor plan, and as a designer, you know, I can go in here and just start drawing some walls. Let's say, let's zoom this out a little bit so we can put this to the side here. Let's say I want to do some incredibly high design architecture, and I'm going to draw a rectangle. Okay, that's a little sarcasm. Obviously, we'll practice real architecture and make a front angled part of the building. All right, there's architecture. Just kidding, guys. When I drew this wall, if you remember, I had generics, and I did that on purpose because maybe my designers, you know, they know kind of generally what they're going to be doing, but maybe not the exact construction. Maybe I don't know if it's going to be CMU or if it's going to be cast in place or precast, or I don't know yet. So I'm just going to draw something generic and kind of get the general form here going on. But when the time comes for me to actually pick a real wall type, what I'm going to do is go up here and search for something that I know matches my standard, like type A. In this case, when I search type A, it runs a search through, again, all 50,000 entries of my content, and it comes back with things that match type A, like these 6 type A walls. There might be other things that match it. I didn't tell it walls specifically. I just typed in that string, and these things were the most relevant that came to the top. Now, again, if I really wanted to, I could do stuff like, hey, let's filter for just walls here, apply that filter. It'll come back with anything that matches walls and type A, or type and or A, I guess, for that matter, and I'll get more things. But ultimately, once I get what I need, I actually usually don't filter too much because type A got me exactly what I was looking for here. And if I wanted to bring in something like this guy right here, a wall interior type A, which in my case happens to be an 8-inch dimension on this particular type A variant, I want to bring this into my project. Or maybe I want to use like the 6-inch wall, whatever, doesn't matter. If I grab one of these walls and simply double click on it, it's going to load that wall into my project environment, and it's going to start the draw command. And by the way, it only brought in the one that I asked for. So this again is reaching up to the cloud. It's going into my warehouse file, which in my case, my warehouse file on my network is about 150 meg in file size. This thing reached into that through the cloud, because it's actually stored on the cloud after I've added to Hive, and it brought in just the one that I cared about. See, with a normal command, you'd have to go manage transfer project standards here. Where is it? There it is. And then make sure you had a project open that actually had the standards that you wanted in it. And then from that project, make sure that you're checking just walls to get the same kind of transfer, but you'd get all of the walls. You don't get to be selective. This way, with the Hive environment here, I'm actually able to be selective, bring it in a matter of seconds without having to open up any other project environment, and then drop that into my design file. Super simple. I mean, Hive can hold Revit families. It can hold template files. You saw both of those so far. System families. It can hold drafting views, typical sheets, model groups, typical detail views, sheets that contain drafting views and legends on them. This is a fantastic environment to store pretty much anything you're going to need to assemble a Revit project. I want to show one more thing here real quick. In fact, I'm going to use do I have filters? I don't have any filters. Okay, so swing single, we'll use that same search that I did a moment ago. And I want to point something out. Let's also filter. You know what? I probably should have just used this guy here, swing single corporate doors. This is going to run a search on all doors that are in this particular library right here, Revit content for my company, that match swing single and our doors, right? So it's giving me all doors in my library, my corporate library, that are swing single, or that somehow match swing single, because swing double is actually showing up since it's part of that search criteria. But I want to point something out here. This door is technically not one of my corporate doors. It's an out-of-the-box door. But regardless, this door has a type catalog. And that type catalog has a bunch of types associated to it. And of course, I could click through these. Let's clear out the search string for Titus here. I could click through it and see the parameters that were defined by that type catalog. That's all well and good. If I was to double click and load this door in a normal Revit environment, I would expect to be presented with types that I could use. And here's where Hive becomes really powerful. Sometimes your families don't have type catalogs, and yet you still want to somehow be a bit selective. So if I click on swing single, you may notice here, does not have a type catalog in the details. And so because it doesn't have a type catalog, normally I would just expect everything to load. But let's load this into my project. When I double click on this to load this into my project environment, notice how I still get a type selector? Because Hive's smart enough to know that maybe I want that. And I can actually choose load all types if I want everything, or I can be specific. I can go grab the two that I care about, and I can load those in. So when I do that, this is going to load out of that family even without a type catalog. It's going to load just those two doors, and just that one door with those two types here. So I have just those two types in here, and I can now drop that out here wherever it's relevant. So this makes this, again, an incredibly powerful tool. My projects can start super lightweight because I'm starting them out of Hive with basically nothing in them. I can add stuff that I need and only what I need. People tend to be less fearful about purging things because they can always go back to Hive to get whatever they need. Now, two final things about search here. I'm going to clear out my filters, and I want to search for something. So far, you've noticed probably that as I search, the file name is kind of primarily what I've been using to identify what's going on here. But let's search for something where that's not going to be the case. I'm going to use a mechanical example here. I'm going to call up Titus. Titus is a building product manufacturer for the HVAC space, doing a lot of air terminals, popular here in the US and in a couple of other places as well. Notice how as I search Titus, these air terminals in the file name, they say nothing about Titus. If I click on one of them, it doesn't really matter which one, but if I click on them, as the details for this family comes up, I'm going to see over here that my type names in this case don't show anything about Titus either. In fact, I'm going to make this a little wider for you so you can see a little bit more of the data that's going on over here. In fact, if I go to my filter parameters and I type in Titus, then this is going to search through all the parameters that exist in that family for that type and tell me all the information. Like in this case, the manufacturer is Titus. So when I search Titus here, this little quick Google search, this looked through my entire library, all 50,000 entries of content, all families, all the loadable component families, type families, documents, all the things, and it searched inside of them for things that it could find, and it pulled out Titus from manufacturer and presented this to me in a matter of seconds. Like, this is quick. And if I really wanted to load this, again, I would double click on it, load this into my project. Even without a type catalog, I can be presented with types that I can be selective about, right? Final thing about searching here, I want to search one more thing. I'm going to type in shared, just kind of see what shows up. Okay, this is going to pull up a series of PDFs. Notice how Hive doesn't have to just be around Revit content. This can be around pretty much any content you want. You want to put training videos into Hive? Go for it. You want to put in PDFs, like your standards documentation? You want to double click on this and open it up in whatever your native PDF reader is, which for me happens to be Microsoft Edge, apparently. Yeah, go for it. You can understand how to deal with shared coordinates, or I don't know, you want to put in imagery. You want to put in materialization components. Yeah, do it up. Put it in the Hive and make all of that searchable. When you're doing that, I do recommend sorting this stuff into different libraries. And that just makes it a little bit more filterable and a little bit more control over who can find what and how they can interact with it. See, in my standards library, that's actually where this stuff is. If I click on this, and I go take a look at the content properties, you might notice here that the library this is in is my standards and procedures library. It's one of the things I could filter on here if I really cared to. I've actually set some rules in this library, rules that technically don't apply to me because I'm signed in as the company administrator, so I can do whatever I want. But end users in my company, when they click on a piece of content that's in that library, they don't get the ability to rate this content and write a review about this content. They don't get the ability to change the tagging of this content, which is important for my standards and procedures library because I don't want people leaving me nastygram feedbacks that they disagree with my standards. You know what, that's great, you can disagree with me, it's fine, but this isn't the venue for that. However, if we go back here to something like swing single and run that search again, when we go pull up some of these doors, this piece of content is actually in my corporate Revit library. Well, here, if something is wrong, if something is broken, I do want feedback. And so all of the users in my firm would have the ability to write a review. If they can access content in this library, they can write a review in that content. And so you can actually control some of that or all of that from the Hive management portal. Let's go take a look at that. I'm going to jump back here to the Home tab. If I click on the management portal right here, what this is going to do is pull up a web page. Actually, it went up on my other screen. Let me pull this across here. Give me just a second. There we go. And I'm going to unpin this from the foreground. Here on my Hive tab, hive21.ctcsoftware.com here, it pulled up my page and it signed me in already. So I'm signed in with my God level rights into the Hive portal, which gives me access to all the controls here. Specifically, the CMS portion is where I can create things like libraries, and I can assign rights to these libraries based on individual users, or if I want to make groups of users, I can add groups to these libraries as well. So an example, if I go here to my Revit Content CTC library, I've made the thing. My content that's in this library is all uploaded to the cloud. If I go to permissions right here, you'll notice that everyone in my company is a contributor. I have a group that I've made called Everyone, and they're all marked out as the role of contributor. This means that they can leave me feedback. They can contribute to the information sort of in the library by manipulating tags, but that's all they can really do. I also have my BIM managers set up as a manager level role on this library. So all my BIM managers can actually add content and remove content from that library. But I've got full control over kind of how they interact with that. If I was to scroll down to my standards and procedures library, the one where I was mentioning that everyone does not have the ability to just willy-nilly leave me feedback or nastygrams, I've marked everyone here as a consumer only. This means they can find it and they can use it, but they can't change anything about it. They can't give me feedback on it. They can't change tagging. They can just use the stuff in that library. And so you have a lot of control here as to how your users can interact with what you put into the CMS. All right. With libraries, by the way, the ability to make a library is super, super simple. This is a web page, so by the way, if you wanted to, you could use your iPad, your iPhone, your Android phone, your whatever, use the Chromebook. It doesn't matter. It's a web page. You can browse to it, and as long as you have your web-enabled device can render the page, you can go in here and you can do your administration of users of the CMS. You can make new libraries. You can choose some of the options here. You can administer all the rights about those libraries. It's super simple. So let's talk about users and user groups, because administering that is just as important as making up a bunch of libraries. Hive is a named user type tool, kind of like BIM 360. So you will have to go in here and generate your users when you want them to be able to gain access. Now, some of us work in semi-small firms, 10 to 20 people, no big deal. Real easy to create users in that case. You go over here to users and groups. On the users area, you simply add a new user. You enter the first and last name, their email address, what internal office they're a part of. If you want to do some departmental management, you can understand the department. And that's it. That's the only information that we care about for users. In fact, you can even ignore first and last name if you don't want to put that in there and just put in an email. And that's the only really required field here. And once you make these users, you can then also administer their roles, what groups they're a part of. So if I go to one of my users that's already in this library, I have this particular user, Chris, associated to everyone. associated to BIM managers, project managers, and my Dynamo users, because yes, I do actually put Dynamo content into Hive as well. And so this particular user is a part of all 4 of these groups. Once they're a part of those groups, if I've already built up my CMS libraries and taken those groups and added them with rights to libraries, this user will instantly have all the proper rights that they need. Of course, that's kind of all irrelevant in this case because this user is an organization admin, so it doesn't really matter. They've got full God level rights just like I do. All right, another way you can administer your users is by using the Excel workflow, where you can actually export a list of all of the users that already exist in here. If you're the BIM manager for the company and you're the original user of Hive, you'll be in that list and probably the only one by default, unless you've made a few users by hand. But you can download that list of users and groups, and then further create new groups, make new users, assign users to groups, all that stuff from an Excel file. So it makes it real easy to mass modify and mass add a bunch of users just by using a simple Excel workflow where you can then turn right back around after modifying that file and import them back in. And there's one other way you can do this as well. You can very easily go through and use Active Directory Sync, another add-in utility that we have with Hive. It's a part of Hive. You get it with the download. You can have it tie into your company's Active Directory and add users and or user groups from your Active Directory environment and have that pushed in directly to the Hive environment, making it so you're not doing any manual user creation or any Excel-based kind of workflows. The Active Directory Sync tool can basically tie in directly to your AD and lets you just push the users directly. And if users leave your firm, this can very easily disable those users or delete those users from the Hive system so they no longer have access, just like they wouldn't have access to log into your main corporate network. So this whole administration process is actually pretty simple. I have a simple 5-step process I recommend companies go through when they first use Hive. I'm going to actually outline it real quick for you right now. Step 1, I recommend you go into your organizational settings and you allow content caching to the cloud, to the Hive cloud. And I also recommend that you let Hive prefer the cloud content, so it wants to go to the cloud first. That generally, especially for system family content, is the fastest way of consuming the content. Simply save, and you're done with step 1. Step 2 is to make some libraries. There's actually 4 libraries that I recommend most firms begin with. Revit content for your company, Revit content out of the box if you want to distribute out of the box content, standards and procedures if you want your standards content in here, and the templates area right here. Those are the 4 libraries you start with. And again, you just click new, give it a name, create new, and move on, right? You're just giving it a name, and then you're done with that step. Step 3 is to add content to those libraries. And so to do that, let me kind of show you real quick how you can add a bunch of content into Hive. So I have my Revit session sitting here. I have Hive opened up. I'm signed in as a company admin. And after I've added those 4 libraries, I want to dump a bunch of content in here so I can actually be able to search and use that stuff. So what I'm going to do is bring up like a Windows Explorer window. I'm going to go browse for where my corporate content is. In my case, I'm just going to go to my local drive here. Let's go to the Autodesk folder, and we're going to grab some default Revit 2018 content. We'll go to libraries and grab some metric content. So if I wanted to grab doors, maybe I want to grab all the doors that exist in this library and add them to Hive. It's as simple as me dragging and dropping them on top of Hive and then telling it where I want it to go. Revit content out of the box. That's the library that I want this content associated to. And once I've done that, I'm going to click process, and I'm probably going to go grab lunch because those 58 pieces of content at about 3 to 4 seconds per piece of content is probably going to take it a bit of time. Probably, I don't know, maybe 6 minutes to process this. I don't want to sit here and babysit it while it does that. So I'm going to let it process, walk away, and go do something else, maybe go to a meeting or something. If I wanted to process the entire Imperial library or the entire metric library or whatever, I could drag and drop that entire folder onto Hive, give it all 3,000 pieces of content, click go, and let it process overnight. And probably take it, about an hour and a half, whatever. I don't want to watch that, so I'm just going to let it run. At the very end, I'm going to get a report telling me everything that's succeeded, and if for some reason something failed, it'll let me know that too. And it'll actually keep those failed items in my list so I can handle them in Revit fix that content with whatever the problem was, and then just reprocess that because Hive remembers where it didn't actually upload content. It's built it to help you out as a BIM manager. That was step 3. Step 4, the almost last step here, if I can pull back up my internet window here, is to create the user groups. And the user groups that I recommend are pretty much, to start with at least, everyone and BIM managers, and you may want to have more. You may want to have architecture users, you may want to have engineering users, you name it. You can make more groups, but at least an everyone and a BIM manager at the bare minimum. And then in that same step 4, I usually jump back to my CMS, and just as you saw earlier, I like to assign the permissions for those users. So I'd go up here and search for, well, let's go to one that doesn't have everybody. Let's go to standards and procedures. I know that one already has everyone, but let's say I want to add my BIM managers. Simply click into search, and it'll give me the list of the first 5. If I don't find it in that first 5, I can start typing something, maybe BIM, and it'll filter for me. Grab that BIM managers right here, and I want to select what their role is going to be. They're going to be a manager level on this library. Add them to my list and save. So I'm going to make my groups and add them to my libraries as appropriate right away. Save, and I'm basically done with that step. Now, after I've processed all of my content and I've got my libraries pretty well set up with the rights that I want, it's time for the final step, which is at step 5, and that is adding the users. And again, you can do individual ads, you can do the Excel workflow, you can do the Active Directory workflow, whatever it is. Add those users and assign them to groups, and you're done. Your users can start using this. Honest to goodness, all the content that I've placed inside of my Hive environment, it took me a total of about 45 minutes to get everything set up from start to finish. Now, in my case, I only added a few users, mind you, but it really doesn't take very long for me to get all of that added in. So final thing about Hive, I'm going to jump over here to the dashboard. This is the Hive CMS portion. I want to focus on the CMS information. We have a lot of data that's sitting out here. This is going to tell you everything about my library. I guess I was wrong. I've only got 12,000 unique entries of content. There's actually about 50,000 files, but 12,000 unique entries of content. When I say unique files versus unique content, the difference is, like, I've got with my doors, let me pull this forward here. If I go back to one of my searches, let's grab the single cabinet maybe. No, that's not a good example. Let's see. Let's do out-of-the-box single doors. When I pick one of these doors, you might notice that a lot of this content has multiple versions associated to it. Hive counts this as one piece of content with 3 files. So keep that in mind looking at this. There are 12,218 unique pieces of content in my list, in my environment. I can see some basic data about this. There's 60 tags, because you can actually custom tag content yourself beyond the parameters that Hive already searches. I have 17 total libraries. I have 15 favorites total from the users in my company. I can kind of see how that's broken down. Myself, I've actually selected 2 favorites. Chris has selected 7. Joe has selected 6. So I can kind of see how the favorites are actually, if people are using that feature, how many favorites there actually are. And I can also see later on how people are searching for things. In fact, I can see some search statistics over here as well. I can see that there's been 886 total searches on my Hive library. Of those 886, 52 of those actually had 0 results, which I kind of concern myself with. I want to know when somebody searched for something that didn't get anything back. That's meaningful to me. I also understand that people search a lot. 84% of things were searched, but only 15% of those searches actually result in content being dropped. That's interesting to me too, because, well, in my case, my demo environment, I do a whole lot more searching, as you've seen today, than I do of actually using the content. In your environment, your goal would be to at least have about a 50-50, where people are searching and dropping. At least 50% of the time they're doing a drop, right? So also, are people doing saved searches or entirely manual searches? You saw me today do a lot of manual searching. I type in something and tell it to go. I would like to see people using those saved searches more to start their searches and then refining it. But this kind of helps me understand that. I can also see when people are searching. See, in the last few minutes here, or in the last hour, I did 13 individual searches. Earlier today, there was 9 searches run. And if I care to, I can actually isolate who was doing those things. So I can see that I'm using this tool the most. If I went to Joe, Joe hasn't done anything for a while. Well, actually, Joe did have 7 searches that they ran that didn't result in anything, total of 132 searches. And I can kind of see what their typical search terms are here. So I can see how these users are leveraging the system. I can also get a really solid idea of the breakdown of my Revit content. It's going to take it a second to fill in my family categories here, but I can see, how people have been leveraging content in their projects. 3 total families were dropped into this project model by this user. I can see exactly what those 3 families were, the top 10. So if there's more than 10, the top 10 largest families, I can understand exactly what those things are. My supply diffuser round neck RFA was a 5.29 meg family. Well, that might be concerning. Maybe. It depends on how my library is set up. But if most of my families are nice and small and compact, maybe that's going to raise an eyebrow or two. I can also see that this content of the drops, one of them came from Revit 2016 and 2 of them came from Revit 2018. So I can see kind of how this content is actually being used to build up this project model here. And then finally, I've got a tags area down here. I can see all the tags that exist in my environment. I can see those that maybe haven't been used very frequently, like BIM manual. Client ABS partners has 0 tags or 0 pieces of content associated. I can see also if people are searching on these tags, so I can see how many of them are used and how many times they've actually been searched by those users. Now, in a lot of cases, I've got down here quite a bit of stuff. Structure, wood, never been searched. Support, never been searched. 7 things are tagged, but it's never been used. So I can kind of understand, like, am I spending a lot of time manually tagging things and people are never using that or very rarely using that? This can be meaningful for me to just kind of understand a bit about, how my libraries and everything has been set up, right? So there's a lot of metrics here that you can actually go through and use. There's an entirely other half to the Hive kind of tool set, and that's the project data. We didn't talk at all about that today, and I don't think we're going to have really enough time to focus on this since today's focus is on content. But there is project tracking and the ability to actually understand the metrics about how your projects are performing here as well, and it's all a part of the same Hive ecosystem. So talking about the CMS, let's kind of cover some bullet points here. Hive allows you to search all kinds of content, and you may notice that today I didn't look at folder structure at all. It doesn't matter what folder it came from. I've grouped it into libraries, and so it doesn't really matter where it was on my network because Hive lets me search all of it, and the users could care less. They're able to search anything and drop all of it in their project in a consistent way. Hive searches also dig into all of the metadata, including those custom tags, but all that custom parameter stuff that you've got in your libraries, it can dig into all that. As you saw when I was looking through my settings, content can be either hosted in the cloud or exclusively on your local network. In either case, you should keep it on your local network, but it can also be hosted in the cloud for easy access remote from the office. When I was dropping my content and when I was searching for stuff, you can see users experience a near instant consumption of those files. Double click, it's in their project, they're off and designing. This does allow Revit-specific workflows. It can also have AutoCAD. It can also have some Dynamo content in there. But really, this is tuned to work very closely with Revit in this case, which requires some specific stuff. Families have to work a certain way. They have to be loaded a certain way, and this knows how to interact with those design apps to make it work right. And then finally, user and group management can be done from any web browser. I was mentioning it doesn't really matter what web-enabled device you're using. Feel free to use the hive21.ctcsoftware.com website there. Go to it on an iPad, an iPhone. I use my Android phone all the time. I have people who are using Chromebooks all the time. It works. You can just administer this from wherever. So it makes it real easy. So if this has piqued your interest, you might want to know how you can get your hands on this. How do you obtain this? Well, this is what I'm going to recommend that you do. I'm going to go to the APAL website here, apal.com.au. These are our partners in Australia there. You can go to their website. You can go to the products portion of their website. And here you can get to CTC software. CTC software, one of the first tools that shows up is Hive. And you can go and get a Hive trial right from their page. You can download Hive, you can get hooked up with this so that you can begin using this today and see if this is a good solution for you to be able to manage your content more effectively, and then also potentially understand more about the analytics of your project models if you want to dig into that side. We have plenty of demonstration videos you can get access to once you're looking at Hive, and up on our YouTube channel you can look at this, that you can understand more about how to administer it, how this can help you with your project data, all across the board. But in today's example, hopefully you saw how this could be really meaningful for the content management and the content browsing. Thank you all for the time that you've given us today. We really appreciate when you show up live. We love being able to answer questions that pop into your mind and be able to interact with you a bit. So thank you for that. We do look forward to seeing you in future webinars that we'll be offering. And with that, thank you all and have a fantastic day.